Well, Lawrence, here we are again. And I know actually this is pretty much the words I use each time I start one of our podcasts. But unbeknownst to a lot of our listeners who are just listening to us on what could be Google Podcasts, or you might be listening through Spotify, iHeartRadio, or through our iTunes podcast, you might not be watching the video right now, though there's very little Christmas decorations behind Lawrence. Lawrence, perhaps you want to try and describe what's going on with me, the captain, Memphis Pambrin.
Well, I thought, ever since I'd have this job, I'd probably want to, live by being Métis. And, Métis certainly celebrated Christmas, the religious aspect of it, and went to midnight mass, but they would go home and go to sleep and really start to focus on the New Year's Day as the big Métis event. And that's when they would open their presents, put out their stockings at the end of their beds. But New Year's Day was always the celebration. But I mean, I don't mind celebrating Santa Claus. Certainly some Eastern European fable or certainly those things. But no, I'm just kidding. We put up all of our Santa stuff and I didn't really have time to get ready. So.
Oh, so you were trying to suggest that you were going to leave it until the way the historic Métis. Yeah. Folks, if you're looking at watching the video right now, I'm wearing looks like a hat toque. For all of you American listeners, a toque is essentially just a beanie or a woolen kind of cap. And it has all sorts of, I think it's balls on it. I have lit up myself with Christmas lights, and in fact they're wrapped all around me. So this is not traditional for how I do my Memphis group conversations, and this is not usually what I do when I'm actually, though in the band I have occasionally worn Christmas lights or wrapped it around my guitar. So this is a little bit more unusual, but folks, we're celebrating Christmas, and Lawrence is going to.
I just want to certainly mention though too, like, if you are wearing those Christmas lights and you are a fire captain, you should stop, drop, and roll if you do catch fire.
If all of a sudden these start to feel a little bit warm, and folks, all of a sudden you hear a bit of a pause and Lawrence screaming, call 911, that's because these lights have actually lit me on fire. So hopefully we're going to get through this. Folks, this is our Christmas podcast. We're probably going to shoot one next week anyways, which will have our conversation about how Christmas is going and how it's going for all of the world when it comes to our challenges, when it comes to our pandemic and the Omicron. But the Lawrence, we're going to talk about a whole number of things today. We're going to bounce around for some of the some things that some Indigenous members are doing for their community through awareness for residential schools. We're going to talk a little bit about sports. I've got another scam for us, and you being a bit more in the social media, we'll have a bit more familiarity with it. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges here in Alberta, support some of our local and Canadian vendors, and we're going to talk a little bit of history. So we've already thrown out that we are in a lot more spaces, and thank you to our sponsors out there who are ensuring that we're getting onto these different avenues of conversation so people can listen to us. But Lawrence, let's jump into one of those things that, because it is Christmas time, because it is this time for holiday celebration, and I know you alluded to it a little bit already, but let's talk about the history behind some of the Métis practices. Because again, folks, as I'm always saying, I'm still learning here on this journey as well.
Yeah, and from what I read, I mean, it's not by experience, because certainly we don't live in the 1800s anymore, but certainly, we do have an understanding of how they gathered as families. And, with many Métis historians who've actually, sort of analyzed a lot of that data and have put it forth to us. And, it's a very interesting way of thinking is, Christmas was always that first day of the holiday, and people would, start to think about gathering, but then every night there would be a ballroom dance at different places, right? Sort of like those kitchen parties, but probably a little more regal, and they would dress up for them and go from one family to the next over a 10-week period until New Year's Day would happen. And then on New Year's Day, they would gather at their grandparents', and that was usually the way they went about things, and open up stockings and presents that day. But they weren't the traditional presents that people usually get. There wasn't Nintendo Switches or, Barbies and all that stuff. But it was basically food items, right? Or desserts and stuff like that were sort of given out to the kids.
It's hard to suggest that I think kids are spoiled today, because Lawrence, I was spoiled. Like, I think of the way it was. This wasn't just a time of here you get one baseball because that's what you're going to enjoy for the rest of the year, right? We were all getting a number of presents, I think. But it is when we have that conversation, and again, folks, I say it all the time, Lawrence's phone is always open. I mean, anytime you want to pick it up and call him and ask him any question about, well, in this case, Christmas, you can always ask Lawrence anything. And, you know, I enjoy this, that we have our historians within the Métis community that can bring this a little bit of this awareness. Most people, most kids nowadays wouldn't even have the awareness of not having the internet around, that you could look up anything at any moment. Imagine back in a time, and I know we talked about this before, of going to a party where the opportunity to maybe just get on a sleigh to sit quietly with a young girl who you might be interested in, that was pretty special. You know, Christmas has evolved. I hope we go back to a little bit of the awareness where people look and go, this isn't about what you're receiving. It's actually about the fact that you get to share time with people you want to spend time with. That should be the message.
Absolutely. And, you know, we only have a few, times of the year where we can gather as families, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and those type of things. And, we value that, especially now. And we're certainly in the pandemic era right now. And certainly thinking about how we gather is the most important thing. But, I really think we should bring a lot of those family value, traditional values back to us. And those people that don't have families currently are looking for a place to go. Well, our Métis families have always been open to inviting them in too. It's just who we are, right? And my parents were like that. We always took up strays, right? So
last summer when you had that barbecue for Region 3, it was fabulous. It was relatively last minute as a result of how the pandemic was rolling out, and you reached out to the community reached out to all its members, and the next thing you know, there was like 400 people coming to have lunch at the regional office. It was so spectacular. I think here's a question for you, Lawrence. You live sort of North Calgary. I live sort of more central Calgary. If each of us had to connect oxen to our own Red River cart, and we're going to meet halfway, how long would it take for us? I got to think that's, for you to get to, say, Nose Hill Park, is that 4 hours? And I'm going 4 hours? Well, actually,
when you think about it, I mean, we carry old, right? So we would take these, big wooden sleds and get a dog team. And it was probably quicker than an oxen from here to there. But I mean, that was during winter. But then during the summer months, you would obviously take livestock, right? But
you know what would happen though if we came up with that to try this out? We'd both show up with the same gift for each other, in which case we'd have to just share them both. We would both show up with hamburgers, and nobody would have brought the salad. Yeah, you're right. Maybe dog sled would have been the fastest. Well, if that's the case, Lawrence, if we're going to go by dog sled, listen, just you come all the way over here to my house. Instead of meeting halfway. So one of the things that I was reading about too this week, Lawrence, was a fabulous story of this young fella, Bialing Tony. And he's a Saskatoon man. He's doing a 300-kilometer snowshoe trip. And what his goal is he's trying to visit all of the residential school sites. And this is one that's north of Saskatoon, I think, called Timber Bay. And really the only way he's able to access it is if he's going to go by snowshoe. 139 different residential schools through Canada. Now, I'm not suggesting instead of dog sled, you and I should try and meet by walking to each other on snowshoes. I know how hard that is. 300-kilometer round trip? Wow.
Well, 300 kilometers to me is not all the residential schools.
No. He's just going to the one.
Oh, okay.
He's just trying to get to that one to say he's been to them all.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, all the power to him. I think it's great. But yeah, I've snowshoed. I mean, we used to snowshoe in class in school and in Prince George. That's why I'm wearing my Prince George shirt right now. But
folks, for all of you who are just listening, Lawrence looks like a lumberjack. The mustache is still there. I imagine until you're ordered or forced to take it off, you're going to leave it on there for a while. But yeah, you have the embodiment of you are ready for a winter celebration. So I guess, did you just come in from unhooking all of the dogs from the sled?
No, I've been, yeah, exactly. I mean, we're cutting down trees or Christmas trees or anything that I can find that's a spruce tree. kind of brings me back home, right?
You're just randomly going around the community cutting down trees.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm watching a lot of Gold Rush and those Discovery Plus shows, and yeah, feel like I'm outdoors, right?
Now you're dressing for TV, then, is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to jump on for conversation, Lawrence, was I read an article this week, and it was, it goes back to the conversation of systemic racism, and CBC was making the comment that now in the article it had said 50% of the population that's incarcerated is Indigenous, and part of what they were representing was that through CBC that the Indigenous population represents less than 5% of the population of Canada, but 32% representation in jail, who's incarcerated. Healing lodges. Like, I think they're trying to come up with new tools in order to try and create opportunities to, support the Indigenous community. I mean, and I don't have enough familiarity, so I have to be a bit guarded on how I present the argument, but the idea that if you've done a crime, you still need to be, you have to take some responsibility for it. How are we looking at this as systemic racism? How do we identify this in the sense of that's too great of a population within the jails?
Well, certainly it's obviously the impacts that, they've received prior to being incarcerated, and that's the systemic issue, and certainly focusing on that, but having putting spiritual value on an Indigenous person, because that was taken away for so many years, and sort of bringing it back to that individual is important, especially when they're in the prison systems, because then you have certainly a group that is willing to actually look at that, because they're either being sober or practicing areas of betterment, all those things, and you kind of give them that solution, right? And bringing elders in and all that stuff is very, very important, but there's a cost to that too for the prisons, and sometimes they're budgeted a certain allowance to be able to do that too. So it's but it's not the more or less the systemic racism, because that will certainly all exist for quite a while, but what you want to do is break that cycle and those barriers of being an Indigenous person. So you want to bring more programming to them, right? To help encourage that.
That's a fabulous point that you made. I was starting to look at this article right from the spot of, you've done something wrong, you're being incarcerated. And, I think if I've read a little bit more, and we've talked about this over the last while, if you have more programs, you might be breaking that chain. Right, start earlier, and this article did comment about healing lodges, and it's just that there's not enough of the programs that are available to prevent the as you point out, the next step of what can happen. We're not being preventative.
There is that point of discussion, or that argument that once you leave the prison system, what does that do to you mentally, right?
Yeah.
What does that do to your certainly your spiritual self? And so you really have to focus on that too. And how many programs are there after the fact when you left, right? And that'll, certainly mark an area of success if you focus on that.
Yeah.
But, sometimes federal programs just aren't there. Sometimes provincial programs aren't there to help, right? So, how do you do that to these individuals? Because sometimes they just reoccur, right, in their life, because that's certainly what they're accustomed to do, right? Yeah, and you don't break the cycle. Absolutely. To all of our listeners out there, thank you always again for subscribing to us, following us on all of our different medias, as we've mentioned, with the Google Podcasts, the iHeartRadio, the Spotify, and the iTunes. If you want to email us and continue to send us your questions, fire them over, tsw at thesqueakywheel.ca, or you can send emails directly to Lawrence and I, Lawrence at thesqueakywheel.ca, or Ross at thesqueakywheel.ca. And just so happens you can find us online at thesqueakywheel.ca. So folks, we appreciate all of the conversation. We appreciate all of the support. In our conversation, Lawrence, you're bringing your conversation from an elected official and your role as the president, and here myself, the captain, and my business relationships within our community. In
in connection too with how we were just talking about the Indigenous community, there's a fabulous thing that I love hockey, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but I also love basketball. I've become a big fan of the Toronto Raptors. And Fred VanVleet, who's one of their strongest shooters, who sort of leads the team now, he's got a scholarship with the University of Toronto, and it's for the BIPOC community, the Black or Indigenous students, and it allows for sponsorship and grant and scholarship funding for undergraduate work, and it also provides you the opportunity to have some one-on-one mentoring. And obviously, I think this is coming from the challenges that Fred has faced. He has his own little business as well, outside of him being an NBA basketball player, the best of the best in the world for playing basketball. But how fabulous is that, right? This is where we're bringing those sports heroes who are bringing conversation to let's provide new opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that, certainly a celebrity lends their hand to an actual foundation or a charity is a good thing, because that only, enables that charity and those nonprofits to achieve a little more success, right? And if BIPOC is his, if that's his charity he's focused on, I think it's great. It's a much needed thing, and certainly we need stuff in the Métis community and First Nations too. And if there's celebrities out there or sports people who want to contribute, nothing wrong with it at all.
Mm-hmm. I like to think that you and I are the local celebrities that are supporting a lot of the available programs here. Right now, I think you and I are tied for celebrity status. Well, you have a much higher number of LinkedIn followers, but we value those for different reasons. And that's just me saying that, folks, to try and protect my own ego. The new variants that are coming around, we've changed from identifying where they come from. Are we trying to choose names that are hard to pronounce? Because I read about that all the time. The Omicron variant. Right now in our province, and I think it's going to start happening throughout all of Canada, where they're handing out test kits. What a challenge. The idea that the province says, okay, we're going to hand out all these kits. But again, with time, you think we would have come up with better methods. For a while, you could go and get masks available at fast food marts. So there was a lot of angry people I've read, and as of December 17th, who were trying to go to the pharmacies to get kits, hours and hours long waits, and unfortunately never even got anything.
Yeah, I mean, if it's what they say is first come, first serve, and that's their rule, well, then yeah, they're going to get long line, and it's not certainly before that, pharmacies just were not giving them out unless you had a letter from your boss, right?
Right.
Actually receive one. So, but then you still paid. Now these ones are free, and it's first come, first serve, and who knows where they've all been sort of, taken up one box at a time, right?
Yeah. And, I ended up going to get mine as well. And it was a bit of a lineup, bit of a process. This was not as easy as there's somebody dedicated just to do this. The pharmacy was still trying to do its job. And some of the things the pharmacy has to deal with for every individual person might be 10 or 15 minutes. So yeah, there can be long lines, and it's not an enjoyable experience because you're still standing, trying to stay 6 feet distanced and, wait here to try and get your product. But oh yeah, it's not an enjoyable time.
Yeah, but I know it's Christmas time, but there's not a lot of masks where I'm at, that I've noticed. Even late night shopping now, there's not a lot of people wearing masks.
Oh, people are getting lazy. They're starting to get complacent. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The sticking a little bit close to home, Lawrence, Swan Hills in Alberta is going to be, or is I think they've somehow identified, maybe through Alberta Health, that they won't have an emergency room physician for 4 days. I hear this a lot in the sense of employers, including the pharmacy I was just recently at, going, they just can't seem to find anybody to hire. I'm not 100% sure. I never really was a big fan of CERB, where I understood and met a lot of people who were making more money not working than if they had worked. So, I don't know if this is, is it the location? Is it just the fear that, physicians, there's enough work out there that they don't want to be the ones moving to Swan Hills, or working out of Swan Hills. But that is a new challenge for all of these small communities, not having a physician available.
Yeah, I mean, that's the government will sometimes make cuts to Alberta Health or some certain areas, and that's usually what it is. I don't think it's the physicians themselves or the emergency departments, but certainly it's a budgetary thing. And sometimes we lose ambulance out here in Airdrie on the way to Calgary, for a day or two, right? So it's just the way it is, but then it comes back. So
that's actually a really good point. You read a lot about that where, and I have, read that somebody will be brought in from Rocky Mountain House, and that ambulance doesn't get back out there until the end of the day because they end up getting trapped in the cycle of working wherever they are. They work for the province, and that's their expectation. If there's something they have to respond to, and I'm sure the province works to try and get them back. But yeah, it's bless each one of those frontline responders and our paramedics who are and EMTs and EMRs who are stepping up to support our communities, because these are the people we need to rely on. Not when you don't need an emergency, but when you are having an emergency, yes, and you want to hope and know that they're there.
Yeah, just make sure that you're having an emergency. None of these calls where I'm sure 911 gets where they left their stove on and they want somebody to go in their house and they check on it or something like that. Make sure it's
Lawrence, you are bang on. When they even have radio programs or radio ads that say, I know what the difference is. You've got to understand what the difference is between an emergency and non-emergency. Lawrence, I know you say it every time with absolute clear conciseness. You know what that light is for.
No, it's a surprise, and I'm having seizures now because you're shining a light in my face. Wait.
It's there to represent the rest of the Christmas light. Folks, the red light is flashing to say that this is time to have a conversation about scams. And this is one of those ones that is there for everybody. This doesn't just affect our seniors, folks. It affects the kids. Anybody who gets caught. People want to work at fear mongering, or they want to prey on your generosity and benevolence. So some of the ones I wanted to talk about today, Lawrence, in our section on scams today at the Christmas time is the Facebook ads. This is not limited to Facebook. So if you work for Facebook, please be aware that this is not a contravenant to any suggestion that Facebook does anything wrong. I don't know how much more I'm supposed to say about that, but everybody, all these different tools do it. Sometimes, folks, just like the ads of days of yore, if the ad is too good to be true, it probably is. And a lot of the things I've been reading is, people are seeing $250 fire tables. And who doesn't want one right now? They want to be outside enjoying a little bit of the fire table, and they're seeing it for $80 delivered. Well, yeah. And what they end up getting looks like a can of beans, right? It's just the tiniest little can, and there's nobody to complain to. Mm-hmm. And you must see a lot of ads, Lawrence. These must be pop-ups. Isn't that the world of social media?
Actually, I got one today, and it was from Amazon, a fake email address, because I clicked and seen it was a big mile-long address.
Yeah.
But it said, we're trying to give you a package. Please click here to give us your address and information so we can get the package to you, right?
Yeah.
And that was an email.
And there it is, right? They're trying to mine information. They're trying to get you to give them the information that they need. I was waiting for you to say that the ad was saying you could buy Squeaky Wheel t-shirts half price. Folks, if you get one of those ads, buy a couple of t-shirts for us because we don't have any for sale at this time. That's something though, Lawrence. Folks, if you have any suggestions on what it is that you think you'd like to get to support the Squeaky Wheel, maybe it's a toque or a baseball hat or, toilet paper that, has our logo on it, make sure you send us those suggestions. Lawrence, we do have to build a little bit of a for sale page. We're gaining a lot of traction. We're gaining a lot of interest. Maybe our faces on toilet paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as it goes around, yeah, I'm not too sure what that means towards people's commitment. And one of the other ones is, same as these Facebook ads, puppy scams. Somebody's selling an animal that they don't actually have, but they prey on your desire to be, to find that animal that you want. And all you got to do is send them $200 to hold that animal. That animal is normally $2,000. They're going to sell it for $800, but they just need a deposit of $200. Folks, without seeing the animal, without knowing that it's there, without meeting the individual, don't send money. Don't send money. In the end, it just you hear too many horror stories.
Absolutely. And I don't know, I'll probably be shopping for a horse one day and for Brielle, and we'll kind of go from there. But, $2,000 for a puppy, or that seems like a lot to me, but better be nice purebred pulling dog sled for me. But
okay, do you think that comes with the dog sled too, or I'm not really too sure? Yeah, I'd like to give a little shout out too, and this is not on behalf of any business by any means, but my wife had ordered some stuff, and the letter she gets comes from, it's Anne, Ann Muller, and she builds beautiful Indigenous first Métis products, and I think she's out of Manitoba, and beautiful stuff. But her little tags, and you can see it here, folks, and if you can't see it and you're just listening, it's a little Christmas tree, but inside the Christmas tree are seeds. So when you go to when summertime comes or the spring comes, you can plant this right in the ground. You've had a chance to enjoy it. It gives you season's greetings, and this is just one little way that you can restart a little bit of growth. I think that is such a great idea of continuing to reconnect us. And I've seen a lot of her products, absolutely beautiful. So make sure you hit her up, look up, and support local or support Canadian. In this case, you're supporting Métis. A lot of challenges around the world, a typhoon in the Philippines, locally, sadly, even for our our sports leagues and such like that, sounds like we're not crossing the border again for a little while. The NHL players have been losing, so many guys to COVID protocols. Flames essentially shut down. The Oilers losing a few guys. This is a difficult time. We're back at it again, Lawrence. I'm hoping we can find strength through our connection with the community and the sports that we, continue to enjoy. But I guess nobody's immune to this.
No, and usually I think with Omicron, it's kind of, it develops pretty rapid. And certainly those guys are breathing on each other pretty much all day at the rink, right?
Yeah.
And on the bus and, here and there. So, yeah, it's ripping through those teams pretty quick, but hopefully there's nothing serious. I mean, a lot of them are vaccinated now, so hopefully they have that protection.
Well, and you and I, Lawrence, again, we've talked a lot. We started getting back together for our connection in our office in order to film together and a place to bring our guests. And then all of a sudden, the world just changes everything. And some of our guests who do travel, it makes it more difficult. Again, folks, thanks for listening to us. We're going to continue to work at bringing our guests on, and we have quite a number who have stepped up who said that they're interested in being on our show. And now it just becomes some of the coordination. Everybody's struggling, and definitely at the Christmas time, we're all having a challenge with it. This week, Saturday Night Live with the handsome, sexiest man alive, Paul Rudd, had to film with no cast. Well, essentially no cast and no fans. It was most of it was just sort of all pre-filmed. Boy, such a successful year for that artist, and here he is not getting a chance to film in front of.
Well, it's really too bad SNL operates like that, but the Squeaky Wheel's here if they're looking for some talent, and certainly a way to reach people during this pandemic. I think we're there. I think we're up to the next level.
Saturday Night Live, you heard it right here from Lawrence, the president of Region 3, Lawrence Gervais. Yes, we are willing to host a Saturday Night Live together. So folks, for all of you listening out there, if any of you are friends with anybody at the level of Saturday Night Live and you just want to send our information along, you will find both of us quite humorous and quite engaged.
And plus, Lawrence, at the same time, I'm the sexiest man alive. I don't care what people say about this Paul Rudd guy.
Folks, on the Squeaky Wheel, Lawrence has been voted the sexiest co-host on the Squeaky Wheel. Lawrence, that's fabulous. Way to take the reins and claim that. My mother actually told me that I was her favorite host of the Squeaky Wheel.
Oh, that's nice of your mom.
Yeah, isn't that fabulous? Now, I'm pretty sure your mom was going to say the same thing.
No, my mom didn't say nothing like that.
She's going to say that Ross is an absolute fabulous host. Lawrence, let's close our session out because we got to the 30-minute mark. For some reason, with all the stuff that we talk about, we get to it in an awful hurry. But just to bang out a little bit about some of the things that are happening for our local citizens.
Oh, yes. We do have, a few things. There's not that much going on right now because of the pandemic, and we're in the holidays too. But we do have COVID funding, and a lot of the locals. We got a substantial amount from the M&A and provincial council, and we dispersed that to the local councils, according to population. And we're pretty excited that money is there. And so if anybody wants to find out, please, go to our Facebook group at Region 3 and you can get those numbers there and those contacts. And if you are in need, and we're at that certainly stressful time of the year on people's pocketbooks. So, but certainly the funding is COVID related. So if you are suffering a little bit or had, job loss to it, or, certainly been affected by it through sickness, you can access that fund. So they are there. So I just encourage people to apply.
So, folks, you heard it here. Make sure you go to our Facebook page. Make sure you go to albertametis.com. Again, you'll find those phone numbers. If you need to, reach out to us. And these are programs that are made available for our local citizens. And, folks, as Lawrence pointed out, those funds are available to the locals. And if you reach out to the individuals who are the governing bodies of each one of those locals, they can support you with programs that they have regarding COVID funding. And I wasn't trying to essentially reiterate exactly what you just said, Lawrence, but maybe if we both say it.
I think you did word for word.
Yeah, this is pretty much word for word. I think I wrote what you said down and pretty much just said it again. This is, folks, where you need to share that message. Continue to share it with the rest of everybody else within the Métis community, so they reach out to their locals and ask for that kind of support. Folks, from all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, from Leighton behind the scenes, who's been sorting us out, I don't know if it's going to be this week, Lawrence, or if it's going to be starting next week. I would even almost imagine this week. We now have the strong support of beautiful music that's been under very generously. We've put together with a fabulous artist who we've actually talked to, or we've had conversation with, Alex Kusturuk. And you can find Alex Kusturuk, Alex Fiddle, and he's the opening now for a lot of our programming, and he is just an inspiration in the music community. And I have an opportunity to be playing with him here shortly in January, but he's been providing the music for our show. So from all of us here, from Leighton on behind the scenes, from Lawrence, the president, Ross, Memphis Pambrid, continue to look us up, memphisgroup.ca, continue to find us, TSW, and thank you folks for subscribing. You mean the world to us. Keep the wheel squeaking, keep your family safe, and please enjoy the holidays for what it's meant to be, connection and gathering. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, from M&A Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrid. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.